Welcome to Becoming is Messy, where we dive deep into the journey of survival, transformation, and everything in between. I'm your host, Meghann Dawson, here to share the honest, unfiltered stories behind my own process of becoming. Life isn't a pretty and perfect straight line, and neither is becoming the person we're meant to be. Here, we embrace the ups, the downs, all the beautiful, chaotic, messy moments that shape who we are. Whether you're in the thick of change or reflecting on past transformations, this space is for real conversations about what it means to grow, stumble, and rise again. So get comfy, settle in, and let's get messy. On this episode, we're diving into a topic that's as raw and real as it gets: loss, grief, healing, and the power of meaning making, especially when life goes completely off the rails. I'm joined by my new friend, Dr. Red Hoffman. Upon seeing her TED Talk, Making Meaning After Violent Death, I knew we had to have her on the show. Red is a trauma surgeon, a hospice and palliative care doctor, and the host of not one, but two powerful podcasts, Surgical Soul and the Surgical Palliative Care Podcast. She's one of only about 100 surgeons in the U.S. who are board certified in both surgery and hospice palliative medicine. What makes Red's story unforgettable isn't just her professional resume. It's her personal journey. When she was younger, she lost her grandparents to a car accident. And then at just 19, she lost her father to a terrorist attack. Years later, she survived the suicide of a partner. Red still shows up in this world with fierce love, deep compassion, and even laughter. We talk about her work at the sacred intersection of life and death, where she guides patients and families through final moments with reverence, humanity, and radical compassion. We also discuss body grief, the complexity of addiction and recovery, what it means to love again after betrayal and loss, and how to metabolize trauma without losing yourself in it. Red shares deeply about her own rock bottoms and how she's managed to claw her way back with grace, honesty, and some well-timed Vanderpump Rules binging. This conversation is about how to make meaning out of unthinkable loss, and Red has so much hard-earned wisdom to share. So let's dive in. This is Death, Redemption, and Vanderpump Rules: Living and Loving After Traumatic Loss. Red, thank you so much for joining me today on Becoming is Messy. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Meghann, for having me. I feel like I am a hot mess, so I am happy to be on this podcast.
We're going to spend a lot of time on your backstory. Before we fully dive in, first of all, I just have to say I have been so excited for this conversation. I've been sharing a lot of my own personal trauma journey the last couple of months, and there were just so many parallels and synchronicities. I just have to thank you for the book that you recommended. If you could, let our readers know what the name is before I forget, because it was it's been such an incredible fit for this topic.
Yeah, the name of the book that just came out 2 weeks ago, I'm forgetting the author's name right now, Jane, but I'm forgetting her last name, is called Body Grief. Yeah. And I think the way that the author, Jane, has been describing it, it's a book for anyone who has a body, which is all of us.
Yes, I love the title, and I have to say that language, body grief, is going to be something now that I use going forward. So I will share the book in the notes for this episode, and we'll certainly be referring that author a lot going forward, because I just love that language. I feel like that is spot on.
And Meghann, I'm putting this out into the universe. I think you should contact Jane and ask her to be on your podcast.
To admit, I feel like I've thought that as I keep listening. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just covered my own. It feels serendipitous. So hopefully I'm going to put that out there for us to collaborate in some way in the upcoming months. To help us set the stage of your journey, let's just start with today. And I'm curious, this chapter of your life, just give us a little insight of how you would describe that.
Now, it's really interesting, especially the name of this podcast, Becoming is Messy, because I would say that 2024 So I turned 51 years old in 2024. But I would say that was my year of really becoming more of an adult, which is really interesting. You would think in some ways I was already an adult. I practice as a surgeon and a hospice doctor, so I have adult responsibilities. There was a lot, and I think a lot of people have this story of like feeling like you're never fully arrived, as we were just previously talking about. And so my life in the last couple months has been buying my very first house. It took me this long to feel secure enough in my own self that I could handle that responsibility, and then grounded enough in one place in the country to feel like, okay, I can make this a home. And I think those are themes that a lot of us struggle with, maybe don't always name. And then I also got engaged. And again, I could spend 24 hours talking about my lovely dating experiences for the last million years, and they're great stories, but finally felt that, again, that safety and security enough to say, okay, I feel like I can settle down. I'm worthy of settling down, and that I'm worthy of being loved like this, and that I have the capability to love someone like this. So yeah, that's becoming an adult.
Congratulations on the engagement. I feel, yep, let's put that out there. I feel like we need an episode in the future of all of our past dating stories. I think that we'll get together. I have a feeling we can put together something pretty entertaining. A lot of the red flags to avoid.
Be heavily edited, I will say.
Yeah, yes. A couple, you use some language there to reference this phase becoming an adult, and maybe a little later in life finally feeling secure to maybe hunker down in a singular place and buy your first home. Everybody's story has a bit of a messy path to get there. Yeah. Fill our listeners in on a bit of the twists and turns of your own journey.
I share this a lot, but this is so relevant to my story, is that when I was 14 years old, my dad gave me the book, The Road Less Traveled, which was a really big book back in the 80s. He just like intuitively knew me. We had a very cool spiritual connection, I feel. And I think he just knew that I was going to walk my own path. And I certainly did a lot of personal stuff, but I'll just speak from my professional path. I got into this great college, ended up dropping out after my first semester because I was struggling with drugs. And so like college was not going to happen right then. And then went from thinking that I wanted to be a writer and then a social worker, and then finding courage. A lot of my stories about finding courage to say, no, I actually can pursue some sort of life in medicine. And for me, that was wanting to pursue a degree in biology and women's studies, which I did, and then go into naturopathic medicine, which is more of an alternative medicine. And I did that, but I will say my road has so many twists and turns. In the midst of all that, I went to Thailand and I did a 500-hour yoga teacher training. So it was like a little over 3 months. And then I went to India to study homeopathy. And while I was in India, it was my first time in the operating room, because I was studying homeopathy in a truly integrative hospital where there were homeopaths and medical doctors working together. So in the morning, we were in homeopathy clinic, and in the afternoon, we rounded with the medical doctors, and I got to see my first surgery, which was a cesarean section. And I remember, so for those people who've never been in the OR, it's usually very cold, unless you're in a burn OR, and then it's like 100 degrees. But in India, it was very warm. And also what was wild is that everyone wore flip-flops. So you took your shoes off, and there was like a box of flip-flops. And so you put your flip-flops on. It was the weirdest thing. And all I remember is that there was a lot of fluid, and I just felt like I was going to faint. But I came back to the United States and I was like, oh my God, I want to be a surgeon, which is 100% different than wanting to be a naturopathic doctor. So I finished what I started. I'm a big fan of finishing what I started, though I don't always think that's necessary. But I wanted to finish. I finished naturopathic school and spent some time working and applying to medical school. And I love sharing this part of my journey. I didn't get in the first time. And I remember my mom asking me, like, you're going to do that again? And I'm like, oh, I am definitely applying again. And I got in the next time. And when I went to medical school, I said, I want to be a surgeon. And I changed my mind a million times about what that looked like, but eventually became a trauma surgeon. But while I was in medical school, because of my past, I became very interested in end of life care. And so I got to go to medical school in Portland, Oregon, where end of life care is really integrated palliative care and hospice care into our medical education from the beginning. And so I learned a lot about palliative care, and eventually through my training decided I want to do a mix of both, of palliative care and hospice and also surgery. Definitely another kind of weird path. There's about 100 people in the United States who do both. And I'm very proud to be one of them. And my life has just been, again, twisting, turning. I thought I had my professional career worked out. It was in a great place. And then my partner in 2020 had a horrible accident, suffered a traumatic brain injury, and eventually ended up dying by suicide 7 months later. And in that midst of time, I also ended up with multiple newly diagnosed chronic illnesses. So like my life changed again, because then I was like, oh, this lifestyle of working a million hours and being up all the time is not going to work. And so I was able to shift my life, still doing surgery and hospice, but in a little bit of a different mix. And yeah, it's just been a lot of, I don't look at my life as like these jagged edges. I look at it like Lombard Street in San Francisco, just this very curvy path, but with a lot of, like, I'm just trying to float that river a little bit. I tell people, I think it's very courageous to change one's mind. A lot of times we just get stuck because maybe we're financially stuck, or we feel stuck because we invested so much time into something that we feel like we owe it to ourselves or to someone else to stay there, but that it's okay to change. And part of growing up and growing older is learning how to navigate those changes with some sort of grace. It's messy and painful, but it can also have some grace. And that grace starts with ourselves. We have to have grace with ourselves.
I keep on joking about all these different kind of synchronicities in meeting you. And one of them is we have 3 teenagers, and our middle daughter is a junior in high school, and she is planning the medical school path. So she's just focused on undergrad right now. Biology is a potential for undergrad. She eventually wants to be a neurologist, is the path that currently she's considering. But I'm just excited to share your little bit of your career with journey with her and the twists and turns, because I think that when we look at youth and young people today, where you just think that what you're deciding now is going to shackle you forever for this future, and just I feel like you're a testament to the ways you've just ebbed and flow with what life brought you.
Yep, 100%. Thank God for our ability to shift and change, and that we're not stuck. We have a million new awakenings. It's actually pretty cool.
Yes, yes. So when you look back, I know you touched on losing your boyfriend to suicide. In reading your story and watching your TED Talk, even trying to land on what are the questions I wanted to go to that were not insensitive, and what I landed on, just a curiosity of you back then. What did one step forward look like? What were those initial steps? Because I think for all of us that have walked through grief and trauma in different ways, we can look back and see those steps. But the people that are newly in it, what is some guidance to just get moving forward?
That's a great question. What's very fascinating is because my father was murdered almost 30 years before my boyfriend committed suicide. Is when I found my boyfriend, I witnessed that. I heard we were in a huge fight. He went outside to smoke a cigarette. I heard that gunshot, and then I found him actively dying. I still remember walking up to this shed in our backyard when I found him and called 911. When I walked back to the shed, so I walked away for a second to call 911. And when I was walking back to be with him and see more of what was going on there, I remember saying to myself, you will make meaning out of this. But that was only because I'd done this before.
Yeah.
So most people are not going to be in that experience when you're experiencing grief for the first time. And so as like a new griever, I think the biggest thing to know is that there's no timetable. There's no timetable. Like you don't I just tell people you don't have to do anything. You don't literally have to do nothing except just be. I think in this day and age, like there's so much about, especially on social media, that like we want to share and then we want to put it all out there and try to put out this package. And really it's like, you don't owe that to anyone, and nor do you have to put that pressure on yourself. Like just taking a breath and being And then just trusting, because I'm saying it and many other people say it in the world of trauma and grief, is there will be a point in your life that it is going to feel different. And it makes me weepy. Like I always say, you are not going to die from this. You will feel like you're going to die. And I wanted to die. And I had a gun in my house and I was like all over the place because my boyfriend shot himself. So it's not as if I wasn't thinking about that. But I intuitively knew, because I went through this before, is that there will be a time after you can metabolize this grief, whether it takes like months or many years. My mom, she didn't even start doing that work until 2 decades in, that you will feel different. And if you could just believe that I believe, then that is sometimes enough. You don't have to believe that I believe that at some point it will feel different for you. It will never be the same. Life is going to look different. I don't know if it's going to be better or worse, but it will feel different enough that you don't want to die anymore. Just have to hold on. That's number one. And then number two is because I've struggled with this a lot. So my dad was murdered by a terrorist in Cairo, Egypt. And then my boyfriend basically shoots himself in front of me. So I'm like, what the hell?
How much time had gone by?
Almost 30 years between the two. But I was like, this is
crazy, right?
Like, it's too much. I always felt like my dad's death in particular was too much because the story was crazy. And I just want to say, your story's not too much. I'm a trauma surgeon and a hospice doctor, so I've heard a lot of stories. And some of them are like, sometimes we just sit, me and my partners, and we're like, oh my God, this is like a lot. But it's never too much. And you don't, I would just say, don't be embarrassed of your story.
Yeah.
This is just what happened. You didn't ask for it. This is how it is. And I think find your tribe that you can tell that story to, you know what I mean? And sometimes, and even the details, because I think it's very interesting, Meghann, that you said no one really wants to talk about suicide. I was like embarrassed to even talk about, I don't think I said on Facebook that my boyfriend committed suicide for almost 6 months, and I'm in the death and dying world every day.
Right?
I was like, why am I carrying this shame? First of all, there's no shame in how someone dies. It has nothing to do with how he lived. But like, why am I so embarrassed?
Oh, I know. That's the whole idea of becoming as messy, is to be able to share our messiness, because what I've so come to believe is that, similar to you, I've had moments where I've thought, gosh, this is too much. I have just so many crazy mixes of trauma, and it just feels like when another one hits, it's like, are you kidding me? How does this happen too? But then I think it's that realization eventually where it to me, it is the biggest and the most trauma I've ever been through. And it's my experience, and that's worthy to acknowledge. And then on the flip side, whatever somebody else is going through is their own body trauma impact. And there's just no need to compare them. There's no, to that person, it could be an extreme feeling. And sometimes it's almost like people will hold back a little bit. Sometimes people will hesitate to tell me, hey, I'm a little nervous to get my wisdom teeth taken out, or I'm a little nervous because I have to have a C-section and I've never had surgery before. But you've had so many. I'm sorry. I know that's me. It never sounds dumb. If that's your first time and you have fear, then that's something to acknowledge and to honor.
People say there's no grief Olympics, there's no trauma Olympics. Here we're both sitting having had a lot of trauma, and I can just assure you that you may be comparing your trauma to mine, but I am not comparing my trauma to yours.
Yes. And another thing is, unfortunately, but fortunately, those of us that have had so many experiences with trauma, in many ways, I think it can go one of two ways. Either it makes you stronger, or it can break certain people. And I feel like with those of us that have been able to get the tools and the support and all that we need to be able to heal and learn from our trauma, it does, like you've described, like to live what you did with your boyfriend, but you had tools to be able to navigate. It doesn't mean it made it easy, but you did have tools. Where some people, it might be their first ever trauma. And I watch that happen to friends, and they're like 40 years old, and almost breaks them because they haven't had to build up that muscle yet.
Yeah. And also, like, it's very interesting because 6 days after my boyfriend's death, I was in therapy with, amazingly, the guy he was seeing as a therapist. And we had very clear boundaries, but he already knew the whole backstory. So we just jumped into doing work. But the only reason I knew to get into therapy is because I'd had so much therapy in my life. And it was the same thing with knowing certain things about just like being kind to myself, not going back to work right away. Like, I'd already seen a lot of this, and also seen what I had done the first time with my dad, that didn't necessarily work. And now I'm like, okay, I've learned all these things and I can do things that may be more supportive of whatever I'm going through right now. Yeah, I guess I would add, if anyone's a new griever, if there's a way to either get into therapy, but not everyone has that option, or another resource that I loved is called the Grief Recovery Handbook. And it's for any sort of grief. It's like we're talking about body grief, but it's like for any sort of like loss, whether it's like the loss of a relationship through death, through divorce. It's a loss of, it could be the loss of a job, could be the loss of autonomy. Say you just went through a horrible medical trauma. The Grief Recovery Handbook is, I call it like a beautiful place to funnel all that maelstrom of emotion that you just feel crazy at the beginning because there's so much. It's a nice place to funnel it. It's not going to fix everything, but it's like a step-by-step kind of process in how to process all of these emotions that may feel too much. It's like one of my favorite resources.
Oh my gosh, we'll have to check that out because I found that grief, even with a whole background of trauma, when I first experienced the emotion of grief, I sat with my grandfather who died of lung cancer, and I was his advocate those last few days and was really the point person for hospice. I took care of his medication and all of that and helped him transition. It was just the most both beautiful and brutal, and it was a tough one. The feeling and the weight of grief, but also being traumatized of just being there to see somebody pass away. It was an emotion I never felt. As much as I'd gone to funerals in the past, I just don't think we can learn enough until you live it. I feel like there's just so much with these deep emotions that you don't gain the tools really until you live it. So to be given a tool for when you go through it is so powerful. Taking your own then experience and then shifting it to patients that you work with around these themes. What does that then look like when you're supporting people in the thick of these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I have two different parts of my story. Like I have the part of my story before my boyfriend died by suicide, and then I have the part of my story after. The part of my story before is most certainly the way my father died and how that whole situation played out, like definitely got me very interested in trauma. I love being a trauma surgeon, but also in death and dying, and in particular in grief, particularly in the grief that families go through after someone died. And so I think what it looked like in all those years of my medical training and my early career was, I feel like because of how my dad died and the chaos that surrounded his death, I just got very comfortable with sitting with other people's chaos and strong emotions. And so a lot of the work I do at the end of life is just sitting and holding space, bearing witness, I think is so important, because I've been at a lot of deaths now, is recognizing that, like you were sharing with your grandfather, for many people that I get to meet, many of these families, they've not been through another death. And so helping, I call it like curate the death, inviting them to come touch and their loved ones, or like recently it got to move someone over in bed so that like this older woman was dying, and I got it so her daughter could be in bed with her and hold her while she died, which was like so healing. First of all, who doesn't want to go out being held by someone who like loves you the most? The beginning of her grief process. Like she got to hold her mom while she died. And then reminding people that if this music was important in life, okay, let's play. I play so much music for people. And then I love invoking our ancestors at the bedside. Really asking a lot of questions like who's waiting for them on the other side. And especially this, to be very mindful. Some people don't have that belief system, but where I work South, that like really that works for a lot of people.
Oh, definitely. You're reminding me of, I think I've shared this before, but one of my favorites is Anne Lamott. A universe moment was I happened to have tickets to see her, and it just fell on 2 weeks after my grandfather passed. And it ended up being all on grieving and death. I just sat there and sobbed and like cathartically, but she described death as birthing your own soul. And I think it's the most beautiful. And I feel like that very much resonates with my experience, where it's like that basically our soul can handle what it needs to go through to be able to pass.
Wow. That is very powerful. I love her. And I think I love her too, because she is very good friends with Ram Dass, who's definitely one of my dearest spiritual teachers. And so, yes, I love that connection.
So I'm curious. I feel like with death. And with that transition period and what you're describing in the different ceremonies that you do with families, just being so close to death, I'm curious of just anything surprising or beautiful you've gotten to witness in those experiences, if you feel okay sharing that.
One, I always say, I think that death is very similar to birth in that some people just like some babies just pop out and some babies like you have to labor for 30 hours. And so I always remind people of that. I think that dying sometimes is really hard work. Like I've watched people,
exactly.
I call it getting stuck between here and there.
That's
you
right.
could feel that like their souls have left the building, but their bodies are still stuck. And so what I talk about with families is that in my belief system, those last hours or days or sometimes weeks in this body that we're in, we're doing our last bits of work for this lifetime. And that's between us and whoever we believe in or whatever we don't believe in. And like, it's very personal. And I just try to help families recognize that like, we just have to allow this patient to do their work and rush it. I want people to be super comfortable and I don't want them to be struggling. So I'm obviously a hospice doctor. I love giving medication, but like sometimes like I can't solve all that suffering. Some of it's like existential stuff that some people just need to go through. So I think I've been surprised by sometimes how much work it is. I've been like amazed at like how sometimes you can really feel the spirit leave the room. And this is a spirit I'm not even connected with.
Yeah.
I felt it. My cat died like 6 weeks ago. And I definitely, I felt like the second that spirit was free, I was like, all right, it took another minute for that body to catch up. I was like, all right, left the building. So I think that's just really incredible. The last thing about grief, I always say grief begets grief. I found this in my own life too. When we're going through losing someone, it is not uncommon for all of our other losses, our past losses to come up. We have to remetabolize all of them again. And that's totally normal. So a lot of times I'm sitting with families. I work in a huge community hospital in Western North Carolina, but it's like the biggest hospital in Western North Carolina. Families have been there for generations. So it is not uncommon when I'm sitting with families that they're like, oh yeah, like my mom died down the hall 3 years ago, or my Mima died 10 years ago. They start telling about all these stories. And it's so common. And then that's okay. You might think like, why am I so sad? Say if someone died who's a second cousin or whatever, but it brings up all those other griefs like that. Yes, it feels as big as when my mom died because now maybe you're re-grieving your mom. So I think like around all of that is again coming back to that idea of having grace and patience with ourselves and being just really kind to ourselves during those experiences, some of which might not make sense.
As you were sharing your experience, I was just thinking a little bit of the one that I had, and just it's one of those things now that people don't believe me, but I really wish that everybody had a chance to experience and be there to walk their person home, because it makes me teary, but it's just like it changed my perspective on so many things life and death related, and it just took away my fear, my normal day to day, when I saw that my grandfather's body, the soul it did leave. That body was no longer his. And so but yet he was still present. The next day, the lights kept flickering all day.
Oh, I love that.
You'll love this. I'll tell you, I don't think I've shared this story before, but the craziest one was the next day we're sitting there. So I think he passed away 9 p.m. the night before. And so this is the next morning around 10 a.m. We hear this church music playing. And everybody's like looking around trying to figure out what it is. And so we finally find his iPad, and it's an alarm going off with this music that sounds like church music. And so we're just like baffled. We turn it off. We go to try to turn off alarms, but there's no alarm set and there's no music on his iPad. So the next day it happened again. So it happened a few days later. Finally, somebody had the idea to use like Siri and ask Siri, what song is this? And the song was an instrumental called Forever.
Oh my God.
And all the skeptics in my family have tried to solve this and they haven't been able to. So I don't know what it means,
Amazing.
but whatever, I'm done trying. A lot of times I just accept the magic of the universe. Regardless, like it gave us peace and it just made me believe in something bigger and beautiful.
Yeah, it's been really cool too because so much of what I do is based in science and proof. When you're operating, there's no,
Yeah.
I mean, you're just faced with this is what it is right in front of you. But to
Yeah.
have that other part of my life get filled and get to feel that magic is
Yeah.
just, it's incredible. It's incredible. And it's very interesting because if anyone's watching this, I smile all the time when I hear these stories because
Yeah.
even though I smile with tears in my eyes, even though they're so sad and they pull at your heartstring, there is also such beauty there. And to feel so close to another being, to get to experience that with someone who you love and who's loved you your whole life. Pretty
Yeah, it's a privilege.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, quick update from the Messy community. This episode inspired a brand new addition to the Messy collection over at MeghanDawson.com, our Hot Mess and Active Recovery tank top. It's equal parts sass, survival, and soft cotton. And honestly, it's the perfect uniform for living, healing, or just owning your glorious chaos with pride. Head over to the Messy collection at MeghanDawson.com and grab yours. Wear it loud, wear it messy. You've earned it. Now, back to the show.
Another thing I've heard you talk openly about is your own addiction recovery. And so I'm curious of just a little bit of you today and just how has that journey shaped you as a doctor, you as a human, just you as the imperfect human you are in this moment.
So imperfect.
Aren't we? We are all.
I have used like many different things in my life, substances, food, sex. Now that I'm like a little older, I've come to realize that obviously I'm just trying to, I mean, if you've ever done internal family systems as like a therapy, like that, this addiction or eating disorder, whatever is a part that's really trying to protect me. And the more I work in this realm, I'm like, I think what it's trying to protect me and what a lot of us are looking for protection from is like emotions. And sometimes those are like good emotions, but I notice whenever I feel too much or it feels like too much, I want to like reach for something. And I'll share like my experience with like my eating disorder. And I've been dealing with this thing for almost 35 years now. And I'm nowhere near like, I do think I might struggle with this part for the rest of my life. But what I've found is one, I'll just say a little bit of benefit of being as we get older. I think, and someone told me this when I was way younger, is that like the drive to do harm to ourselves a lot of times will burn out or a little bit. And it doesn't work for everyone, but I've seen it for a lot of people is that drive to do like severe damage to ourselves burns out. And part of that is because we've invested more in our lives and we have more to hold on to, whether it's like a marriage, kids, a relationship, a profession, whatever, or just like a good day tomorrow. So I have become over the years like more invested in my tomorrow because my tomorrow looks like pretty good. You know what I mean? And then the other thing like is about grace is when I act out or when anyone else is like acting out on behaviors that we wish we didn't do, like I do not let that ruin my whole day. There might be hours in my day that I am not super proud of or not psyched that I did something, but I'm like, okay, take a minute and reset, whatever that looks like for you. Like for me, a lot of it's taking a bath, it might be praying, it might be just like taking a walk, taking a few deep breaths, getting on the phone with a friend or a therapist or whatever, and resetting so that the rest of the day might be good. Now, when I was younger, like that, I would just blow the entire day and maybe the next day over either getting high or like going on a crazy binge purge situation. And I don't know if I won't say I don't have the luxury to do that because I guess I could do whatever I want. But what I want is to also have a good tomorrow. And so you have to set yourself up for that. And so I think a lot about in terms of resetting my day and then trying to set myself up for a good tomorrow. And but it's imperfect and it's so messy. And I don't like talking about it, but I talk about it because it's like A lot of people talk about that both ends. Like
That's
I
right.
be a successful person and still struggle in areas of my life. Just because I have an eating disorder doesn't mean I don't get to be a surgeon and help other people. That's, if I was waiting to be cured, I might be waiting for a really long time.
I'm just so glad that people are courageous to be able to talk about those types of things because
Yeah.
I that was really one of my motivations to be able to start the podcast. One of the kind of pieces of becoming is messy is that I find people love or people say they love like a comeback story, a redemption, but really they love the beginning and they love the end. They love
Instead of
to
the messy
know.
middle.
And so even now, it's like when people will look at me and they'll say, Gosh, you're so resilient. You've been through so much and you're so successful. And it's, yeah, but I've been an alcoholic. I've had affairs.
Yeah,
I've numbed in a
all the
lot of
things.
different ways. And then that's makes some people uncomfortable. And I get it. And you had mentioned earlier that you don't owe anybody your story. And I do believe that. And I think it's been a journey. It took a while for me to be able to even admit to one person
Right.
some of these things about me. And it took many years getting very comfortable and strong and being able. And sometimes I still don't like talking about it, but I also feel like I want the world to shift how they perceive addiction and affairs and just I could go on, but the behaviors that are clearly coping things that are masking pain. So I just love being able to openly talk about those things.
Yeah. And I'd say in trying to normalize them, I don't think either of us would say that we're not responsible for our actions or that we're not sad that we caused harm to other people or that we're not sad that sometimes we're not our best selves. But this is the reality. So, like, when faced with this reality, then what do you want to do about it? Do you want to just, again, lock yourself in a room and just do all the work and try to get better and not engage at all until you're 100% better? Or do you want to just keep engaging? Because I've heard many people say, part of getting out of all of these like behaviors or whatever you want to call them is community. So like we have to be willing to engage with other people while we're trying to be our best selves.
Yes.
And again, my best self today is going to look 100% different than my best self tomorrow because I'm
Right.
also in a body that's imperfect. I'm in a weather system that's imperfect, a world that's imperfect. It's just imperfect. We are in the messy middle. This is the whole life
Yes.
is messy middle,
That's right. The whole life is, and it's just that healing journey never stops. It's like
Yeah.
you're just, but if you're curious and you keep on trying to learn from it, I feel like there's potential to grow, and it does eventually make you stronger. I think.
It's interesting because I don't as much resonate with the word stronger that I've heard.
Yeah.
To me, and how I look at it, especially how I engage with like my patients, is it just helps me understand the rest of our human beings. You know
That's
what I
right.
mean?
That's right. Yeah. I couldn't grapple with the word. I feel like you
Yeah.
might have heard me pause a minute, but there's just like an ability to flow with things a little bit
Yeah.
different when you have a curiosity and a willingness just to understand the moment.
I love the curiosity is like huge.
Definitely. So I'm curious though, now with this imperfect world and the things that you're exposed to and the things that have happened to you, how do you protect your own heart? And then also, I guess beyond that, how do you trust to love again? You mentioned you're engaged, and so how have you trusted to give your heart again after experiencing so much loss?
I'll share with you. This is a part of my story I don't love sharing either. Here's the
Yeah.
mess. My boyfriend who killed himself, I found out much after he died that he had been cheating on me for 4 or 5 years of our relationship. So I was stuck metabolizing this disloyalty after he died. And there was no way I couldn't really communicate with him about it in an effective way anymore. I don't know that I'll fully ever 100% trust, but I will say that I'm really conscious of trying to keep my heart open. Like I felt my heart very much closed after my boyfriend died. And I was like, I didn't want it to close, but I felt it closing to protect me. And I kept asking, how can I protect myself and still keep my heart open? And I just was talking about this in therapy literally 2 days ago, because I often will feel it start to close, but I'm very aware of it. And then I am all about making gestures in my relationship. Fiance, okay, let's have a moment together. We've been disconnected the last 2 weeks. let's try to talk about that, or make a gesture to be intimate with one another, or a gesture just to spend a half an hour watching TV together. So making a conscious effort to make those gestures. And then as far as like trusting, we talk about this a lot. And one thing that I've done in this relationship is from the beginning, I've just been very clear, and he has his own trust issues. When I feel anything, I just tell him right away. And I certainly think that helps. And I try to like just get it out in the open. Does it mean I'm never going to be cheated on again? No. I've been on both sides of that story. So I don't know. But all I can do is I want to trust. Like, I want to trust. I want to love. So I don't let things fester. In my last relationship, I knew, women, we all know. We all have that intuition when something's not right. And I just didn't want to, I just couldn't deal with it. I didn't want to hear about it. I was doing other stuff in my career. I don't have time to deal with that. And I may be being cheated on. And now I'm like, I don't want to sit with this yuck anymore. So I just come out and be like, I'm just having a minute. And I just need to like put this out there. And that's all I can be responsible for, is just putting it out there. And his response is his response. I am amazed. I don't know if everyone feels like this. I have no idea, but I feel like relationships are a lot of work. I'm working against my own stuff. And then I'm working against my partner's own stuff, whatever is coming up, and like trying to work together. It's work. It has to be really intentional.
It is. When you talked about not letting things fester, I think that to me is one of mine and my husband's key. It's just like that, the freedom of no longer having that, like a pit in your stomach each night, like feeling like you each have secrets. And it doesn't mean we don't say hard things, and it doesn't mean we don't make mistakes and have moments of weakness and moments where we're just a jerk. But it's like we just own it. It's just been really powerful to get that clear off of our chest and be able to go to bed with a feeling of peace, which I can't say I had many times in my past.
Yeah, but I think, I think it's like a lot of it is that I don't know. It's so cheesy, but I really think if you don't water your garden, that shit is not, it's just not going to grow. It will rain sometimes, and you could just depend. That's right. God's grace, right? Yeah. Rain. So you can ignore it for a while, but at some point something's going to die. And so that's how I think of my relationship.
I wonder, does it resonate with you? I was going to ask you how you made the leap to start sharing your stories so openly. I did want to mention to our folks listening to go check out your TED Talk to hear a little bit more of your full story. But to me, I feel like the more I share my story openly, the more I can't imagine just not owning my full story. And that even translates in my day to day. So it's like work with my husband, but I now treat him just like I treat everybody, where it's just, if I have something to say, I'm going to say it. And I know this sounds harsh, but my husband and I agree on this, is that we would rather risk somebody not being in our life because of our truth versus holding it in and having somebody stay. So anyway, I just said a lot there, but really it was just, how did you start opening up more and more broadly sharing your story?
Yeah, I think towards the end of my medical training, I really recognized like how much my father's murder and my whole experience with my grief process after really was really informing how I took care of patients and their families. And so I think from there, I started doing a lot of narrative medicine, like a lot of writing. And then I think it's just like important to acknowledge that I can share things at 51 that I wouldn't necessarily want to have shared at 31, because I was at a different place in my career.
Right.
Like I feel pretty, like I work really hard at my job and feel like I'm worthwhile to my hospital. So maybe I'm a little more comfortable sharing like I'm this perfectly imperfect person. When you're just starting out, you might not want to share that. There's different someone made a comment recently on a podcast I was listening to about there's some chapters that we don't read out loud.
That's right.
I loved that. You know what I mean? It's part of my story, but I might not want to share it right now. And so like that has changed for me over time.
Love that. I have chapters that I have just condensed down into a file and locked in a vault. And maybe I'll reference the lessons, but I really just don't feel like revisiting them.
Yeah, I think it's like important to remember when you're on social media, especially when we're younger and we're thinking like we're putting this out into the world, and just be like, is now the time at this point in my life with maybe things that are online, is now the time to put it out to this person. You also have to know your audience. The things that like, who's going to listen to this podcast versus like your boss who might not listen to it. You know what I mean? But also remembering that it is out there. So just, I think it's so important to be authentic, but it is also important to think about who is your audience. And sometimes depending on where you're talking, it could potentially be the whole world. So you just want to be like protective of yourself. Not that there's anything to be ashamed of at all. Does everyone else get to know this about me right now? Maybe not.
Yeah.
It's like a gift that you're giving to someone when you're sharing your story. So I
Yes.
haven't always been right in my choices in that either, but it's something that I think about a lot.
Yeah, I think with the protective, I feel like it's also okay to change what your thought is. I feel like I've seen I remember a story with Elizabeth Gilbert one time on Oprah coming out, having a total shift from a perspective she had shared in a previous book. And I just thought it was so powerful. Maybe that wasn't perfectly right, but in that moment, that was your perspective. And that's okay. We all are continuing to learn and grow. So just put out the new evolution. And that doesn't mean that you were wrong before.
Or you're stuck with that.
Yeah, you're wrong. We're constantly learning and growing. Yeah. I have a couple of questions that are just a segment called Rapid Reel, just a chance to get just a little glimpse behind the title and story and just finding a little quirks and stuff. No overthinking, just some quick responses. So the first one is, what's a small everyday thing that always brings you comfort no matter what kind of day you've had?
A bath. I'm building my dream bathroom. I haven't had a bath in almost a year because I'm building this beautiful bathroom. I have a bathtub waiting for me, and
it sounds wonderful. Are you an Epsom salt kind of girl?
I love Epsom salt, relaxing, and I think they help you poop, which is great.
Yeah, I did not know that. I'll have to start being if there's a connection there.
Yes.
All right. So, what's one unexpected place where you've felt a deep sense of peace or connection?
Oh, I will say eating key lime pie on the Intercoastal in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was like almost about 30 years ago. It was like a moment of peace.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah. What's something about being a surgeon that still surprises you, even after all these years?
How hot the operating room can seem.
I believe this. Like, even when you were talking about traveling, I'm like, I can't imagine it feeling hot.
Sometimes it just gets so warm. Yes, it's awesome.
Yeah. What's something that makes you belly laugh no matter what?
Oh my God. Some good comedy. Like, I just love watching comedy. The raunchier, the better. Just a laugh. Yes, just laugh out loud. And also that show Arrested Development.
Gosh, that whole cast is so funny. So would you call that? The final question was going to be, what's your comfort rewatch show or movie when life gets hard? Is that it, or is there another one?
Freaking Vanderpump Rules. I've watched that in the last couple of years. I think I've watched the season at least 6 times. I have it on in the background a lot, and I watch it while I exercise. I was just reading recently that rewatching television shows is a way to regulate your nervous system because it requires nothing from you. It's just comfort and security because it's not changing.
Oh, I love that. I might have to rewatch something tonight. That sounds so good. I love that. So we're getting close to our final question. Before we get there, I just wanted to give you the chance. Is there anything we've missed talking about? And then also, how can folks connect with you and your work?
Oh, yeah. No, I think we've actually touched on everything that I wanted to touch on. I'll just say, I think I'm like big into my age right now because I'm perimenopausal and not wanting to be. But I just want to say for younger listeners, my biggest thing that I've learned is the power of showing up. There have been so many times where I haven't wanted to show up. And a lot of that comes back to not having a good day, not loving my behaviors, not liking what I look like, all that stuff. And so many of my opportunities in life, both personal and professional, have come from showing up. So I would say, even if you're struggling, if you can get yourself, and sometimes that showing up is just on Zoom. So I'm like acknowledging that sometimes your body won't let you show up in person. But if you can show up, like the magic that happens, I think is really powerful. And I know that I missed a lot of opportunities when I was younger because I was so deep into my behaviors that I couldn't do that. So that would be like the last thing I would think. And then as far as finding me, I'm on all platforms at Red MD, like medical doctor, ND, like naturopathic doctor. So Red MD, ND. And if you want to watch my TED Talk, if you just Google Red Hoffman violent death, because it's on making meaning after violent death, you will find me. If anyone wants to chat, I love chatting, slide into my DMs. I have a website, Red Hoffman MD. You can always email me there. I'm always happy to talk about these topics.
I just love chatting with you. So I'm going to be blowing up your inbox. I'm going to get all these messages all day long. We'll be chatting. The final question is, there's listeners right now who might be in their own rock bottom moment. And I'm just curious, when you were in their shoes, when you were in your own rock bottom moments, what is a piece of advice that you wished would have landed sooner?
I'm going to go back to something that I think one of my old sponsors said to me that I said before. If you can't believe that I believe, and I'm just going to say, whoever you are, and if I haven't been there, then I've had patients or friends who've been there at the bottom, and then you think it can't get any lower and it drops out and it gets lower, but it's need a lot of different, but believe me that it can get better. And again, it might look totally different. It might not look like I'm not saying it's going to look like what you imagined or what you even want it to look like, but if you can hold on, and I'm just believing that it can be a little bit better. Never perfect. Most times not what we would have chosen at all. I wouldn't have chosen a lot of this, but better and worth surviving another day for. I think that's my biggest thing.
Awesome, Brett. It has been such a pleasure getting to chat with you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Meghann. And thanks so much for having this podcast. And again, just like sharing your own messy story and then giving space to, normalize the mess, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Before we wrap today, I want to invite you to be part of the Becoming is Messy community. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And if there's anything that resonates with you, please leave a review. Your feedback means the world to me, and it helps other people find this community. Follow me on social media. I'd love to hear your ideas for future topics, your questions, and stories from your own messy moments. And if you're feeling inspired, check out the Becoming is Messy shop, where you can grab a mug, a t-shirt, or something else that reminds you to embrace your messy magic every single day. A huge thank you to the incredible Wolves and Sheep for providing the music for Becoming is Messy. Check them out on your favorite music streaming platform. As we close out today's episode, remember this: messy is just another word for growing. So keep showing up, keep laughing, and keep making beautifully awkward progress. Until next time, stay messy, my friends.